Shalom, shalom, family, peace, peace, peace. Giving all praises to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. To our ancestors, those who have come before us, those who have paved the way. Great prophet, great prophets of old. Giving honor to Yeshua, Yahushua, and those who ignorantly call Jesus the Christ. For showing us today, showing us how to live the life according to the Torah. So that we may be a light unto many nations. Just want to say thank you. Come on in. Let me know you're in the building. Comment. Love to hear from you. I just want to touch a little bit. Not going to be before you long. Time for me is short this morning, going into this afternoon. So I just want to touch just a little bit on the Russian-Ukrainian conflict that we see, war that is taking place. I just want to say that war is never something to be taken lightly. War is something that instills fear into the hearts and minds of men. When you have people who are in power or are ruling over men whose interests are self-serving, war is always a detriment. But there are times that war is necessary. I'm not against war for liberation. I'm not against war for salvation. And I'm not against war for retributive justice. Retributive justice. And so we first have to understand that war at times is necessary. And let's just be honest. Sometimes war is necessary. We often hear the narrative and critics of people that talks about Joshua conquest of the people of Canaan and how Joshua unfairly and without provocation waged war upon the land of Canaan and those inhabitants of Canaan. Well, I often tell people that that's the misconception and understanding of the differences in waging war and how war is seen. If you read the story and the narrative of Joshua and quote unquote Joshua conquest, some like to term it, I like to term it as Joshua's war of liberation. And if you get into the backdrop and the narrative of the story, you'll see many things that are occurring. First of all, the land is described as one that is very hostile. It is a land that is not filled with peace during the time of Joshua. It's not a land that is filled with fairness. It's being ruled by tyrants. It's being ruled by chieftains and overlords and people who are intimidating or overpowering other people. And even the people in the land, as described, especially when we read in the chapter, Romans chapter 8 and 9, where it talks about how the land has been defiled. The land itself has been defiled. And one understanding and interpretation of the land being defiled is that innocent blood is being shed. That's one interpretation of the land being defiled. There existed during the time of the Joshua liberation, and that's how I present this information in the scriptures as we get into the narrative and talk about Joshua. And I'm going to be pulling that up really quickly, just so we can get some understanding about what I'm saying, why I call it Joshua's liberation. And then we're going to tie this into what we're seeing going on with the Russian and Ukrainian conflict. So, but we're going to talk about war and the differences in war, right? So let's talk about that. But first, we're going to deal with this false narrative of Joshua conquest and Joshua going into a land and just waging war on a people. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I just want to show you the differences in that. And oftentimes we hear critics of our faith and our understanding in the scripture often deal with the fact that Joshua went in to just destroy, and innocent people went into a land that was not bothering him. He just went into a land, these Asiatics just rolled into Canaan and killed a bunch of African people. That's been the people of Cush that were in that land of the descendants of Cush. They were occupying that land. And so that's been a narrative that's been pushed. But let's actually talk about what's going on. So I'm going to go to Joshua, book of Joshua, the 11th chapter. Let me bring that up. I'm just going to read a little bit. In the building, hit the like button, like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment. Let me know who you are. Peace. What's good? What's good, Kofi? What's good, Kofi? Appreciate you, man. Let's talk about this really quickly. All right. I believe now you can see my screen. You put that down there. And let's see. Let's see where we want to take this. Maybe I want to take this back a little bit further. I'm going to take this back because I want to show you guys something very important. I think this is where we want to begin here. Joshua 1:1. And I'm going to read a little bit because I want to bring something out, right? This is why I call it a liberation. And not just Joshua's conquest, right? It says Joshua 1:1. It says, now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses my servant is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, unto the land which I do give to them, even to the children of Israel. Now, that's very important there if we're reading this in context, because what it's saying to us is that the children of Israel were given this land, right? But it was given to the land of not just the children of Israel, but it was also given to the land of others who were not of Israel. And that's very important. The land was given to the people who were worshiping the Most High God as their God. Right? Let's read this again. It says, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, unto the land which I do give them, even to the children of Israel. Right? So we know it wasn't just Israelites that came out of the Exodus experience and going into the land of Canaan. These were people who had been oppressed by the Assyrian rule in ancient Kemet of the times. The book of Isaiah tells us that it was the Assyrian that oppressed the Israelites, the Assyrian that were oppressing the people. So we know, and we have identification throughout the scripture and extra biblical sources about who these oppressors were in ancient Kemet. These are the people that came to power who knew not Joseph, right? And as they came to power, became prominent in the political arena, they were able to take power and ascend to the throne in ancient Kemet. And with that, they began to oppress the Israelites. And not just the Israelites, but if you read, there also was an oppression taking place of other people who were in the land, not just Israelites. And so upon this Exodus, you see people coming out of that. Moses leading them out of that, leading them in throughout the wilderness, leading them to Canaan. And then we see Joshua, after the death of Moses, in the first chapter, being told to go into this land, take these people and lead them into this land where I, the Most High, have given them, even the children of Israel. It says, every place that the sole of your feet shall tread upon, that I've given unto you, as I said Moses, from the wilderness and this Lebanon, even unto the great river Euphrates, the land of the Hittites, and unto the great sea toward the going down of the sun, shall be your coast. That is a vast land, people. It's a vast land. There shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee nor forsake thee. Be strong and of good courage, for unto this people shall thou divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto their fathers to give them. Right? And so let's continue. And people often like to say, well, it was just only given to the children of Israel. Well, no, we just read again that it was given to others who were not of the children of Israel. But because they worshiped and they followed and they had faith and trusted in the Most High God, that they also were given the land. One example we know for sure, for a fact, during this time is Caleb. Caleb was not an Israelite. That might be a study we need to get into. Caleb was not an Israelite, but Caleb was also promised a portion of Canaan for him and his people. And then the scripture later on tells us that he was allowed to go among the tribe of Judah, but he wasn't an Israelite by blood. It says, the book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, and thou mayest observe to do all according to that which is written. Right? So let's skip down a few verses. It says, verse Joshua 1 and 10, it says, Joshua commanded the officers of the people, saying, pass through the host, and command the people, saying, prepare your victuals, for within 3 days ye shall pass over this Jordan to go and to possess the land which the Lord your God hath given you to possess it. Right? Then he talks about Reubenites and the Gadites and half of the tribe of Manasseh spake Joshua, saying, remember the Lord, remember the word which Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord have given you rest and have given you this land. Your wives, your little ones, your cattle shall remain in the land which Moses gave you on this side of the Jordan. But ye shall pass before thy brethren armed, all the mighty men of valor, and help them, until the Lord have given you, brethren, rest, as he hath given you, and they also have possessed the land which the Lord your God giveth them. Then ye shall return unto the land of your possession and enjoy it, which Moses the Lord's servant gave you on this side of the Jordan, toward the rising of the sun. And they answered Joshua, saying, all that thou commandest us we will do, whatsoever thou sendest us we will go. Right? Let's go to verse 2. Let me show you something here. It says, and Joshua the son of Nun sent out unto 2 spies, secretly saying, go view the land, even Jericho. And they went and came into a harlot's house named Rahab, right, and lodged there. Y'all got to understand, Rahab was not an Israelite. Rahab was a Canaanite. So for all of those who like to place this argument about whether or not we Israelites had it out for Canaanites, without Rahab, we don't have many kings at all. Actually, without Rahab, you don't have King David. That's another thing you have to understand. Without Rahab the Canaanite, you don't have King David. She's directly connected to his lineage as a matriarch. So these are the things we have to really understand and get into. Those are other Bible lessons. We have to bring those out. But watch this. Let me show y'all something here. Let me show y'all something here. Let's go to Joshua 3. Trying to get my way over to. Let's see here. I'm gonna get over here. Right. Right, and here we go. Right? So Joshua 15. It says, and Caleb drove thence the three sons of Anak, Shai, Ammah, and Talmi, the children of Anak, and went up hence to the inhabitants of Debir, and the name of Debir was that of Kirjath-sepher. And Caleb said, he that smiteth Kirjath-sepher hath taken it. To him I give Akshah, my daughter, to wife. And Othniel, the son of Kenaz, the brother of Caleb, took it and gave him Akshah, the daughter, to wife. And it came to pass, as she came unto him, that she moved him to ask of her father a field, and she lighted off her ass. In other words, she got down off of the donkey, and Caleb said unto her, what wouldest thou? Who answered, give me a blessing, for thou hast given me a southland. Give me also springs of water. And he gave her the upper springs and neither the spring and the nether springs. Right. And so you see here Caleb proportioning land. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Judah according to their families. And the utmost cities of the tribe of the children of Judah towards the east coast of Edom, southward were Kabzeel and Edar and Jagur. Now we have to understand, as I said earlier, Caleb was placed among the children of Judah, but he was not a Judite. He was not a Judite, right? Also, let me see here. And what I'm reading is just taking you through the various people who were in the land of Canaan, who were blessed by the Most High in those lands. So it wasn't just them going into these lands slaughtering people, right? As many people say, right? Weren't just slaughtering people in these lands. So let me stop sharing my screen real quick. Peace to you, Green. Wasn't just slaughtering people in these lands. So, but what you read in the narrative is just Joshua liberating these people, because we know that the children in the land of Canaan, prior to Joshua's conquest, or Joshua's liberation, I should say, children were being passed through the fire, served to the god Molech, being sacrificed and killed. And so Joshua goes in and they began to tear down those idols and tear down those practices of child murder. And so that's why I refer to it as Joshua's liberation of the people of that land. You'll have some ignorant people say, well, it was their land, they should have been allowed to practice that. No, the Most High always protects innocent. He always protects the blood of the innocent. He also always calls for retribution against innocent blood being shed. Always. Always. And so war in that instance is what I'm getting to. So war in that instance is retributive justice, where innocent blood is being shed. We definitely should support that when it's been shown to be the case. We definitely support that. So all war is not easy. And that's my point. All war is not easy, right? Because you'll have some that say, well, the Most High told the children of Israel to wage war on all these people. Well, if you go into each one of those narratives, you'll see the evilness and destruction and the innocent shedding of blood that these other nations were committing. And anytime the Most High sent in someone to wage war, it was of liberation or retributive justice. And so we can see that all throughout the scripture. So, but now let's talk about the Russian and Ukrainian conflict, right? And for those who are not familiar with it, Russia and Ukraine were all part of, during the 80s, were all part of the, what they call the USSR, or the United, the Soviet Union, right? Republic. And they were all one land, just as the United States were, right? You had various states that were just one that just made up the entire USSR. And what happened is that the USSR collapsed. And so I want to bring that out so people can understand, right? About the USSR collapse. Well, the dissolution of the Soviet Union. I just want to bring this out so people can see it, so y'all can understand why these two countries are even at war. Shout out to you, Mongo Slave. Peace to you, family. Let me share this really quickly. I'll touch on it briefly. Right, so this is just, Wikipedia. We don't need anything real scholastic here. We're just talking about the dissolution of the Soviet Union, right? Because this leads us to where we are right now in regards to the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, right? So you see here the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1988, 1991 was the process of internal political, economic, and ethnic disintegration within the Soviet Union, right? Which resulted in the end of its existence as a sovereign state, right? It was an unintended result of General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev's effort to reform the Soviet political and economic system. And I remember at the time that he was doing this, Gorbachev, this was during the time that Ronald Reagan was president. We have the famous statement of Ronald Reagan standing at the Berlin Wall that separated, I believe, it was in East and West Germany that separated Germany. And he gives the speech, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Right, and you see the people on both sides, right, tearing down this wall, right, that separated them. One of the reasons why that was important is because the wall not only separated two lands or two countries, it also separated brothers, fathers and sons, sons and daughters, right? These people were related, right? These people were related. And so Mikhail Gorbachev's reform in an attempt to end what they call the era of stagnation in late 1991, early 90s, to sort of get the Soviet Union or the USSR to a place of where they could be more productive in the global economic system, which they hadn't been able to do. And so I'm going to show you here really what this whole conflict we see now is really about, right? Forget all that other fluff and all of that other stuff. this is what's going on here, right? So in late 1991, the leaders of the three unions, founding and largest republics, the Russian Soviet Federal Socialist Republic, previously known as the Russian Soviet Republic and the Russian Soviet Federal Socialist Republic, as well as being unofficially known as Soviet Russia. The Russian Federation, or simply Russia, was an independent federal socialist state, right? Right? So you got Russia, the SFSR, and then you have what? The Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, also known as Soviet Ukraine, was one of the constituent republics of the Soviet Union from the Union's inception in 1922 until its breakup in 1991, right? In the anthem of the Ukrainian Soviet Social Republic, the republic was simply referred to, and let me get that because I think that's important, right? You gotta understand who these people are and what they're doing right now, right? I just want to read that, right? The Ukrainian Socialist Republic, right? They were tied. So from the Union's inception in 1922 to its breakup in 1991, in the anthem of the Ukrainian Soviet Social Republic, the republic was simply referred to as Ukraine, right? So understand who these people are, right? So the Ukrainian SSR was established by the Bolsheviks, right? Following the defeat of the Ukrainian People's Republic in the Soviet-Ukrainian War. So listen, this isn't the first time these people have been to war. The Soviet-Ukrainian War, or the Ukrainian Civil War, which is what we are still experiencing today. And this is what they don't want you to understand, that this is really a civil war, right? This is really a civil war, right? But there was one, these same players that took place in 1917 to 1921, regarded as the Ukrainian People's Republic and the Bolsheviks, right? And so it was during the Russian Civil War, the Soviet-Ukrainian War during the Russian Civil War. As a Soviet proto-state, right? A quasi-state or a state-like entity, including what is termed a proto-state, is a political entity that does not represent a fully institutionalized or autonomous sovereign state. So even though they were at war, to a degree, the Ukrainian government, or the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, was still being ruled. They were still sort of like a vassal state to a degree to the Russian state, right? But they were a part of the sort of like the United States of Russia, basically, right? Of the Soviet Socialist Republic of Russia. And so these people have been infighting for decades, almost going back thousands of years, if you really get into it, right? So just understand that these people this is not something new to them. They've always been fighting. And so now what you're seeing, right, is this tug of war, this saber rattling, right? This going back and forth between two brothers. This is really, as far as the nations are concerned, Ukraine and Russia, these two brothers, right? This going back and forth, just like we saw here in the Civil War times. You have the North versus the South, right? you had many people who were connected and related. Only thing that separated them was geography and ideology, right? You had people to the north and people to the south. They had differences on slavery, and they had differences on how government should be ran. But one thing they all kept together and agreed upon was making money, right? Was making money. They had arguments on how that money should be made, but they always wanted to have, especially even with the states, right? In the United States, and you see the same thing occurring. They wanted a checks and balance system. They wanted each state to have its own power and its own authority to legislate itself, right? There's been many times we've had talks. There's been talks of different states succeeding from the United States of America and becoming its own independent state or country, right? Different things of that nature. We've always had those types of discussions. So that's really what you see here, people. And so it's important to understand this, because just reading about it in the news today, you'll think that these people in Ukraine, a significantly smaller state, is just being pushed around and bullied by those in Russia, right, in the larger state. But these are brothers. This is an infighting. This is a civil war. And so let me show you that that's correct, right? What it is. It's a civil war. Right? And I'm sharing this information for instructional purposes only. So it says, why has Russia invaded Ukraine? The conflict explained. Right? And then we'll bring it to God and Magog. Right? What you see here. It says Vladimir Putin's military invasion is underway after diplomatic efforts failed, right? So let's talk about this, right? It says, let me close this. It says Russia has finally launched.
What appears to be a strike on
Hold on, let me stop that.
In a place called Chukia. And
let me stop that. Let me stop that, right? Let's talk about it a little bit more. It says Russia has finally launched its long-feared full-scale invasion of Ukraine after Vladimir Putin announced a special military operation in a televised address to its citizens in the early hours of Thursday morning. Right? Let me see. I don't want to register with you guys, so let me go find a different article. I want people to understand really what this is. Shalom, Asiatic Lion. Just want to get you guys back here and show that. It says Russia's war in Ukraine, complete guide and maps, video, and pictures. This is what I'm looking for. Right? So here, and hopefully you guys can see it. Let me sort of hide that. You can see this is Russia here, right? And this is Ukraine. Now, don't mistake any of this peach color or washed out red color to be like water or something, right? It's not. It's just lands of territory that are still Russian controlled, right? These areas here, right? And so Crimea or Crimea, was annexed by Russia in 2014, right? So you could see slowly but surely Russia has always been chipping away at these dark gray border areas, and you see these incursions, right, of Russia coming down, inching closer and closer into these lands, right? And look what's around it: Poland, Belarus, Russia, Ukraine, Romania, Moldova, right? So this is the land and area that we're talking about here, right? And Russia, or Rus, as it was called medieval times and ancient times, simply means red. Simply means red. And with that, this is also, if you go to William Beeston's work in 1853, he talks about the establishment of the Roman Empire, and that how that the establishment of the Roman Empire came down through the lineage of the Assyrians, and that how they were also referred to as the Edomites, right? And it is my understanding that these are also descendants of the Edomites, these Rush or Ukrainian people. I want to say something else too. A lot of times we hear about certain migrations of people that came through these particular lands, right? Some were claimed to be Jews. A lot of them claimed to be Jews. But during the time of World War II and Hitler, after Hitler was defeated, you had many Jews that were in the concentration camps, and many that were freed, these quote-unquote Jews, right? They were taken mostly from these lands, especially Poland, right? A lot of those Jews came from these lands, right? The ones that we hear talk about the Holocaust, they came from these lands, these quote-unquote Jews, right? And what's even more interesting about it is that they always had known that this is where they come from. These lands, they're different, right? They came from these lands. Now, during the Balfour Agreement, after World War II, these liberated Jews from Auschwitz and concentration camps in Germany, people that have been brought in on trains, and you see the pictures and the images of the mass graves and those people being placed in the gas chambers. You see that they were liberated. When they were liberated, they asked them where, or actually I should say not asked them, a coalition of now these refugees, or these once political prisoners, these Jews that were taken from these areas, right? Were taken from these areas of Poland and Belarus and Ukraine and Moldova and Romania. Those Jews were taken from that were taken from these lands. They were asked at the end of the World War II, we need to find you guys a home. And so watch this. They never said we wanted to go back home. They never said this. They never called out Poland. They never called out Belarus. They never called out Ukraine. They never called out parts of Russia. They never called out Crimea. They never called out any of these lands. But what they said was, we want to go to a land that is fertile and rich in soil where we can prosper. And their first request, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to try to pull that up, was Uganda in Africa. Not Israel, but they wanted to go to Uganda. When they asked these people if they wanted to go back home, they never said Israel, they never said Poland, they never said Belarus, they never said Ukraine, they never said Romania. You know what they said? Uganda. Uganda. It wasn't until later on in the negotiation, someone said to them, hey, aren't you Jews? And why wouldn't you want to go back to your homeland, which is in Israel, right? And they say, oh, you know, but our people are not from there. What they said. And so then if you go into the backdrop and the story of these people, when they're taken and placed in the land of what we call Israel today, you could see for years they had tremendous time, very difficult time, growing crops and fertilizing and making that land livable. Why? Because they weren't familiar with that land. They were never familiar with that land. Let's see if I can find it. Let's see if I can find it. Let's see. Here it is. It's called the Zionist Congress, the Uganda Proposal. Let's see what they talk about. Right? And this was in 1903. Watch this. It says, when Theodore Herzl began his quest to establish a homeland for the Jewish people, he sought out the support of the great powers to help achieve his goal. In 1903, Herzl turned to Great Britain and met with Joseph Chamberlain, the British colonial secretary, and others high-ranking officials who agreed in principle to Jewish settlement where? In East Africa. Why East Africa? Let's continue. It says, in the Sixth Zionist Congregation at Basel on August 26, 1903, Herzl proposed the British Uganda program as a temporary refuge for Jews. Where? In Russia. In immediate danger. Y'all got to understand really what this thing is about. It says, by a vote of 295 to 178, it was decided to send an expedition to examine the territory proposed. 3 days later, the British government released an official document allocating a Jewish territory in East Africa on conditions which will enable members to observe their national customs. While Herzl made it clear that this program would not affect the ultimate aim of Zionism, a Jewish entity in the land of Israel, the proposal aroused a storm at the Congress and nearly led to a split in the Zionist movement. The Jewish Territorialist Organization was formed as a result of the unification of various groups who had supported Herzl's Uganda proposals during the period of 1903 to 1905. The Uganda program was finally rejected by the Zionist movement at the Seventh Zionist Conference in 1905, but Nahum Sturkin and Israel Zangwill in my presentation, um, or actually in my debate with Rabon, I bring out what he actually says, and he identifies Jews, the black Jews. Watch this. Herzl Zangwall called an alternative conference to continue the plan of the Ugandan scheme. Now, why are they so bent on establishing a homeland in Africa, in Uganda, in East Africa? Why? If you understand who YISRAEL Zangwall is, he was an anthropologist and explorer, politician, as we see. And basically what he believed was that the Jews, or the black Jews, were originally from these lands. He says East Uganda. He talks about that that's where these people are. Let me see if I can find that. Then I'm gonna get back into it. Then I'm gonna get back into let's see if I can find that. What he says. YISRAEL Zangwall. If I can find that, what he actually says. If I can find it. Here it is. YISRAEL Zangwall. He says in a speech given in 1911 entitled The Jewish Race, and published in a collection of his speeches, Zangwall maintained that the Jew, that he says, though mainly a white people, are not devoid of a colored fringe, black, brown, or yellow. There are the B'nai Israel of India, the Falashas of Abyssinia, the disappearing Chinese colony of Ke Fong Fu, the Judeos of Luango, and the black Jews of Cochin, the Negro Jews of Fernando Po, Jamaica, Suriname, the Dagutans, who many, like Rabon and Dr. Reggie claim were never Jews, that they were converts. When this guy clearly tells us in 1911, he's done the work, he says they're Jews by race. And other warlike nomads of the northern African deserts, who remind us what the conquerors of the Philistines were like. If the Jews are in no metaphorical sense fathers of all these people, then all these peoples are brothers one of another, right? Watch this. In the mind of Zangwall, the confines of the Jewish race or people were very broad and could incorporate all the hybridizations and intermixing occurring over the centuries, including the ancient hybrids of vanished peoples. In this sense, he was fair and did not espouse ideas of pure race, although he was sensitive to the idea of affiliation and descent. Right? You can read that Stuart A. Cohen, YISRAEL Zangwall Project, in the Jewish colonization of Mesopotamia, its context and character, Middle Eastern studies. And this goes into a lot of what we see. I know my brothers, when they study the DNA, and they see the migration patterns, and they see the intermixing, and they see what was going on. And we know this was happening in Israel, even in the scriptures, because this is why we're warned not to mix our seed, right? We're warned to do that. But you clearly see throughout the scripture, Israel mixing their seeds. They're mixing their seeds with the Egyptians. They're mixing their seeds with the Canaanites. They're mixing their seeds with different groups of people. And they are establishing a well-diverse Jewish population or race of people, right? My brother Zion Lex laced me up with some information on the other day, and shout out to the brother Zion Lex. Appreciate you, family. That he talks about how Strabo talks about that there was during his time there was no place where you didn't run into a Jewish person, a black Jew, almost in every culture that you didn't run into them. So we see YISRAEL clearly says that there are Jews in Jamaica, the Jews in the Daguestan, in West Africa. He's saying that Jews there everywhere. Everywhere. And the reason why he claims that though they are mainly a white people, we have to understand what he means by white. When he says white, he's not referring to strictly the European. He's talking more about the admixture of the skin tone, which look more Arabic, that what we would look like to be an Arabic people, right? They had that color. As you can see oftentimes, even when you look at certain drawings and certain depictions of people in the Aksumite Empire later on, you see they go from a darker African hue to this lighter hue, right? But these people are not white as in European white, right? They're not white as in European white. And so he talks about black, brown, and yellow, right? He says they are the B'nai Israel of India, the Falashas. If you see the Falashas are a more copper-colored people. Abyssinia, a more very darker hue people, right? The Chinese collective came from Fu. If you look at these people, these are dark, they're like black samurai, right? Or black, they look like dark black Chinese people, right? Like African, but they have the Asiatic eyes, right? The slanted eyes. The Judeos of Luango, right? These are prominent places of people and groups that he identifies as Jews, right? So we clearly see that he was not a person taken lightly during this time. But look what he's trying to do. He called an alternative conference to continue the plan of the Uganda scheme. Why are they so desperate to get back into Africa as Jews? It says the forces of this territorialist movement depend to no small degree on the seriousness of anti-Semitism on the one hand, and on the failure of the political dimension of Zionist activity on the other hand. So, for example, the movement's ranks swelled somewhat following the programs in 1905, but declined considerably. After the securing of the Balfour Declaration. Zangwill became the movement's undisputed leader after the rejection of the Uganda scheme on the grounds of impracticability by the British. Zangwill turned his attention to the settlement in Canada and Australia, but opposition from local residents led him to abandon the scheme. Expeditions were sent to Mesopotamia, Cyrenaica, and Angola, but little came of these expeditions. So, as we can see, a lot of this stuff is still well connected, right? I'm going to show you guys something else. Show you guys something else. That they've never stopped with this plotting and these scheming, right? Let's see if I can find it here. I'm going to show you something. Right? Now, we just saw in 1903 1905, YISRAEL is pushing for the movement of Jews, right, who are being persecuted in Russia, right, for them to find for the governments to help find them a settlement. He chose East Africa. He chose Uganda, right? YISRAEL did. He just showed it. He wanted them to be taken into Uganda, right, to escape persecution by the Rus or by Russia, right? So again, we see this connection that has been in existence well before today's conflict. Let's see why Uganda is important to the Ukraine and to Joseph. Let's see. And to Russia. I'm sorry. To Russia. It says Uganda in talks to rescue citizens in Ukraine. Watch this. I'm going to show y'all something. Refugees flee the conflict in Ukraine into eastern Poland on February 27th, right? Look at who. Look at the. I'm starting to see. Look at these people in the background here. These people are getting off those buses, right? These dark melanated people are getting off these buses, right? Show you something else too. All right. So let's read. It says Uganda is engaging state and non-state actors to help rescue its citizens stranded in Ukraine as the war between Kiev and Moscow enters the fifth day. Kampala urged Ugandans facing danger to remain calm as the Foreign Affairs Ministry gets them help. An official from the Uganda embassy in Moscow said he could not comment on the situation, referred to the reporter to the Foreign Affairs Office in Kampala. Speaking to the East African on Tuesday afternoon, Foreign Affairs spokesman Alfred Nam said the ministry was following the events and had given instructions to its missions in Berlin, Moscow, and Hungary to keep in constant contact with Ugandans in Ukraine. Ugandans in Ukraine. So these Ugandans that are in Ukraine, I believe these are Jews. Let me show you why. If I can find it this way. And let me show you why. It says Ugandan Jews not eligible to immigrate to Israel. State informs them. Okay, I lost for a second there. Just let me bring it back. After years of deliberation, the Interior Ministry has determined that members of the Jewish community of Uganda are not eligible to immigrate to Israel. The Jewish agency had ruled several years ago that they are, but the Interior Ministry has the upper hand in such matters. The decision was revealed in the state's response on Tuesday to a petition filed in the High Court of Justice by a member of the community whose request to immigrate had been rejected. So here you have Ugandan Jews not being allowed to immigrate or go back to Israel, to their homeland. Let me show you something else. They always provide primary sources, very credible. The Jewish Telegraphic Agency. It says Israel rejects Ugandan Jews' application for citizenship again, despite court ruling recognized non-Orthodox conversion. Right now, let me explain something to you because I want to show y'all who these people are and what they mean. Non-Orthodox conversion, not conversions, but non-Orthodox conversions, right? Because that means that these people in Uganda are practicing a different type of Judaism, a non-Orthodox, a different type of Judaism than the people are in Israel, right? And because of that, they do not want to allow them into the land or give them citizenship in the land of Israel. And so, because of that, and this is why I said, I believe these people are Jews. And this is what Zangwill, Israel Zangwill knew in 1903. Go back, right? So from 1911, matter of fact, let me show you. He knew this in 1903, 1905. There he is, Israel Zangwill, called an alternative conference to continue the plan of the Uganda scheme. What was the Uganda scheme? To take Jews that were being persecuted in Russia and place them in the land of Uganda. Now, who were these Jews in Russia? Who were these Jews in Russia? Let me show you how these people are real and how we know, and I believe that these were black Jews or African Jews or Jews, however you want to call it, were in Russia, were in the Danube Valley region. And that a lot of what we see historically in Russia, in fact, is true. That these people were in those lands, right? So watch this. I want to show you. Well, before I get into that, let me continue with this. So now we know what the Ugandan Jews look like that he was referring to, right? That the Zionist parties in Israel have refused them citizenship, right? And I'm not making it up. It's right there. It says Israel Ministry of Interior denied applications for citizens from a Ugandan convert to Judaism again, right? And understand what they mean when they're saying convert to Judaism. They're talking about a specific Judaism. A specific Judaism that's held under Zionist rule. They're not talking about these are not Jews. And watch this, I'm going to show you. By race, as Zangwill says, all right? As Zangwill states here, in a speech given in 1911, the Jewish race. The Jewish race. Again, that's Israel Zangwill says that in 1911. Here he is again in 1905, talking about the people, talking about the land of Uganda. Right? Just trying to connect the dots for you, family. So here he says, watch this. Tabitha Yosef, who has been living in Israel since 2017, first applied for citizenship under the law of return. Now, why is she going under the law of return? Because she's already a black Jew. You understand? So she's returning to her ancestors' homeland, right? But it's rejected in 2018 under Israel's law of return. All Jews, including those who have converted to Judaism under the auspices of recognized Jewish communities, are eligible for Israeli citizenship. Responding earlier this year to Yosef's appeal of the decision to the Supreme Court, Israel's Interior Ministry indicated that it did not see the Abaduyael community in Uganda as a recognized Jewish community, and thus its members would not be eligible under the law of return. Right? So let's watch this. It says conservative Jewish leaders condemn Israel's rejection of Ugandan Jews from immigrating. Let's see what they say. Here they go again. There they go again. Right? Ugandan Jews. Now watch this. The Abaduyael began practicing Judaism in 1919 after a Ugandan leader, Simi Kankugula, declared himself a Jew and began adopting Jewish practices in 2002. The conservative movement began overseeing official conversions in the community. The Uganda community itself, affiliated with the Masadi Olema, the international organization representing conservative communities worldwide, is home to a chapter of Maroon, a conservative movement youth group. Gerzum Shizmo later became the first Ugandan rabbi after his ordination at the Ziegler School of Rabbi Studies, right? And so here's the argument that is often made, right? Is that these Jews were only Jews by conversion, right? But here's the issue, is what they're saying, right? They're saying, watch this. I'm gonna show you that they have always had these practices. They've always had this history of who they are and their families in these practices, but a lot of these people weren't practicing. That's not the one. That's not the one I want to get to right here. Here we go. In October, the Jewish Museum in London celebrated Black History Month. And out of this, you see, when we get down here, I want to get down here to what they read. Right? Here's what we're saying, right? You know, this is what we got to understand when they talk about the establishment of a Jewish community. The establishment of a Jewish community meant you have to have at least 10 or more men in a community, Jewish men, right? Not converts, but actual Jewish men. You couldn't just be a convert. You have to actually have had Jewish roots, right? And this is where people get put off with the way that they use these terms: Jewish community and conversion, Jewish, right? But in order to form a Black Jewish community, you had to have at least 10 men of Jewish lineage or Israelite or Hebrew or Judaic blood, right? Watch this. Through history from their roots, right? That's what they're saying. First through their roots and then to the founding. And so once they have this enough group of men, then they're able to found these communities. Not that they started being Jews at this time, but they didn't have the requirements into what Jewish law would consider a community. There's a difference there, right? These people being actual Jews and the establishment of their community is two different things. And this is what we don't often understand and we don't get when you hear these guys read it. See, they didn't become established through conversion until 1910 and 1919. No, they were always Jews, as this says, community through history from their roots to their founding, of their community. That means they met the Jewish law requirement to become a community, right? And it had to do with the number of men you had to have in that particular community with Jewish history and Jewish roots in order to claim that, right? So that's what that's telling you, right? So now let's go a little bit further. I'm gonna show you what we've always seen. I'm going to get into this real quick. This thing. This talks about those Jews. Jews were, in a sense, the Negroes of the Russian Empire, right? And oftentimes when we hear these types of terms, I just wanted to attack these terms, that a lot of times people were reading this with the confirmation behind it says, see, these Jews were just being likened unto the Negroes, right? Well, watch this. It says the discrimination and violence they suffered under the czars, which forced over 1 million to immigrate to the United States in the decades around them in the 19th century, is one of the reasons their descendants empathized with Black Americans and played a major role in the Civil Rights Movement, right? It says even earlier in the 20th century, the anti-Semitism that had compelled Jews to immigrate from Western Europe led their leading figures to support Black activists to help found the NAACP. American Blacks reciprocated, and for much more of the 20th century, set a sense of solidarity with Jews that was motivated by the common goal of social justice. But there was also a case of remarkable and not completely forgotten Black solidarity with Jews that occurred in the unlikely places and times, Moscow in 1915, and that involved the unlikeliness of Black Americans, a man who became a subject of the czars. Frederick Thomas had already broken repeatedly with his past before he decided to go to Russia. Born in Mississippi to former slaves, he left the South and went to Chicago and Brooklyn in 1890 for several decades before the Great Migration, which started earnest only after the First World War, seeking even greater freedom 4 years later, he went to Europe, and several decades before Paris became a haven for Black American expatriates. And in 1899, after crisscrossing the continent, mastering French and honing his skills as a waiter, he signed on to accompany a nobleman to Russia, a country where Black people were virtually unknown. Right in Moscow before the revolution, there were probably no more than a dozen permanent Black residents out of a population of over 1 million. However, crossing the Russian frontier was not routine in those days, and this was Thomas first encountered the Russian equivalent of the American color line. The 6 European countries in which he had already traveled did not require foreigners to have passports, but the authoritarian Russian Empire did. And because the imperial government wanted to keep certain classes kept out, that was no foreigner could enter the country without ever having his passport by Russian officials, whatever. And so this is what I want to show what we're getting into here. Let me show something really quickly. I want to show this. Many of us have seen these depictions before, right? Many of us have seen these depictions before, right? And I'm going to tell you, oftentimes they try to simply, I don't want that. I don't want that. I want that. Not what I want. I wanted to show this one. Yeah, here we go. I didn't really want to deal with that one, but here it is. Where Windsor talks about the original Black Jews. He says the author discusses the origins of the Hamites and Shemites, or Semites. He states that the original Israelites were of the Black race and that the biblical Abraham was a Black Shemite, a descendant of Shem. Abraham was the father of both the Hebrew Israelite and Arab nations. The Black Shemites intermarried with Black Hamite Egyptian women, giving the rise to the Arab nation. The author also states that Arabia was originally inhabited by Ethiopians, also known as Cushites, prior to the progenitors of the Arabs. Many of today's Arabs are not Black due to the introduction of white slavery. The story of King Solomon of Jerusalem and Queen Sheba, known as Makeda in the Europeans, points to the origins of the present Black Jews of Ethiopia, known as the Philashas. This is what YISRAEL Zangwill says. That the Philashas, he says this in 1911, YISRAEL Zangwill, one of the founders of the Uganda movement, getting Jews or Russian Jews back to, or getting Russian Jews into Uganda. He claims that this very thing, he agrees with Rudolph Windsor. The story of King Solomon of Jerusalem and Queen Sheba, known as Makeda, he agrees with this point here. the origin of the present Black Jews of Ethiopia, known as the Falashas. The Falashas claim descent from the child of King Solomon and Queen Sheba, Menelik I. The queen returned to Sheba, which was part of the Ethiopian Empire, with Menelik I. This is their history, family. Later, Menelik was sent to his father in Jerusalem to be educated, where he accepted the name David. The Jews who returned to Ethiopia with Menelik are claimed to be ancestors of the Falashas. The Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie was also believed to be a descendant of Solomon and Queen Sheba. He also describes the origins of Christianity, Islam, which are the offspring of Judaism. Right? So, let me go down there and show you that. And that's from the Smithsonian, right? Library. We'll just tell you a lot of these people are agreeing with what's being said, right? And then I wanted to show you guys you want to get the modern terms of these people. It says Gog and Magog in the Hebrew Bible, the prophesied invader of Israel and the land of Israel from which he comes, respectively, or in the Christian scripture, evil forces opposed to the people of God. Although biblical references to Gog and Magog are relatively few, they are assumed an important place in apocalyptic literature. For in First Chronicles, let's get that too. First Chronicles 5 and 4. I'll read that too. So here we are, the sons of Joel, Shemaiah, his son, Gog, his son, Shemael, his son, Micah, his son, Reiah, his son, Baal, his son, Uriah, his son, whom Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, carried away captive. He was prince of the Reubenites. And his brethren, by their families, when the genealogy of their generation was reckoned, were the chief Jael and Zechariah, and Bela, the son of Azaz, the son of Shema, the son of Joel, and Aror, and Nebo, and Baal-Meon. I want to look at this right here. We just read First Chronicles 5 and 4. Then we get Ezekiel 38 and 2, which is most people don't really pull a lot of the prophecy from. It's the book of Ezekiel right here, especially in the 38th chapter. It talks about Son of Man. Son of Man, usually when you hear that, you start to see something that has to do with war, right? That faced against God, right? So in other words, prepare to go battle against God, the land of Magog. Now, Now, many people think that Gog and Magog, two separate countries. Some say one's Russian, some say one's China. But in my study, I take a little bit of adverse to that notion, is because I believe that Gog is the nation and Magog is possibly the leader of the nation, right? So you're talking about, or Gog is, or Gog is the Gog is the nation, and Magog is the chief or the leader of that nation. This is what it says: the chief prince of Meshach. Now, Meshach, if I'm not mistaken, today's time, that is the capital of what we know of Russia today. I believe it translates now to Moscow. Meshach and Tubal, and prophecy against him, right? So you see, it's dealing with land and people, right? It says, son of man, set thy face against God, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshach. So the land of Magog, right? So Magog is the title of a person, right? He's the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and prophesy against him. See what I'm saying? It's dealing with a person here, right? And say, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. Therefore, son of man, prophesy and say to God, thus saith the Lord God, that in that day, when my people of Israel dwell in safety, thou shalt thou not know it. And thou shalt come up against my people of Israel as a cloud to cover the land, and it shall be in the latter days that I will bring thee against my land, and that the heathen may know thee, and I will be sanctified in thee, O God, before their eyes. Now, some people often say, you might hear Exodus 38:16, when it says, and thou shalt come up against my people of Israel as a cloud to cover the land, and it shall be in the latter days. That's talking about war, nuclear war. It's alluding to that. And it shall come to pass at the same time when God shall come up against the land of Israel, saith the Lord God, that my fury shall come up in my face. Therefore, thou son of man, prophesy against God, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I am thee, O God, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. Behold, I am against thee. And it says, and it shall come to pass in that day that I will give unto God a place there of graves in Israel, the valley of the passengers on the east of the sea, and it shall stop the noses of the passing. In other words, that the death of the nation that occur among the people of God, that the bodies and the stench of death will be so great. And it shall stop the noses of the passengers, they bury God and all his multitude. And then shall call it the valley of Haman God, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to do battle, the number of whom is as of the sands of the sea. And so often people look at these scriptures and they look at it in an apocalyptic sense. But we can see a lot of these things actually have already occurred in history. But I do believe that spirits continue and they continue to fight these battles and these fates as long as Israel is a nation, or we are in existence. We will always have to contend with these type of issues. That's why I tell people oftentimes, Deuteronomy chapter 28, not a one-time occurrence, it's perpetual, based on the obedience or disobedience of the people of Israel. Right? It's a contingent. It's based on how they obey the word of the Lord, right? And so these things can occur over and over and over again. And they don't have to be the same consistent acts of judgment that Israel brings upon itself. But it could be an instance of plagues, and then it could just be an instance of sickness or tumors or disease. It could be an instance on the loss of many children, those things can be could come at many different times, right? They may not all happen at once to Israel. So we're just talking here, family. That's all. We're just talking. An Asiatic Lion says, he just says, Gog and Magog expand overlaps with Japhet after they came out of the Caucasus and Zagros, took over tents of Shem, Afro-Asiatic city-states and tents. Yeah. Shalom, free spirit. Peace to you. And so oftentimes, a lot of this stuff, I just wanted to show a lot of this stuff, when you start to read it, a lot of it gets conflated, it gets misconstrued. People start wondering, right? And indigenous black man, that's a great statement right there. We're not Hellenist Jews, but Arabic. We're indigenous people of that land, absolutely. And they start to talk about and conflating names and notions and different things of that nature, right? And so oftentimes we have to be not so concerned to the degree about whether or not we are identifying who's Gog and Magog, because oftentimes these people, they only have one defense, and I say that's the Psalm 33, where they're Confederate just to destroy the people of Israel, to wipe our name out of existence, to erase us. That's their whole agenda, right? Whether we identify who Gog and Magog is or not, we often get that. And so what I'm going to do is, I just figure I'll come on and just chat a little bit as I go through my study and putting, make sure you just putting the just building out my lesson. People that ask me how do I really start doing that. Let me show y'all a little bit. Just show y'all how to do that, right? I start going through things. So right now I'm going through my research and study, putting this lesson together. So I already have an outline of pretty much how I want to lay this out, right? But as you can see, as I'm building out this lesson, I appreciate you guys hanging with me and talking with me while I'm going through this information, so we can rightly define this information. You can see this is an article, I believe, from the Sun, and they talk about the deadly alliance with China and Russia's new pact could see them out the U.S. as the world's top superpower, right? So you see how many soldiers China has combined versus the United States, right? We have more military warcraft. Aircrafts. They have more tanks. They have more warships, and combined, they have more nuclear weapons, right? Now look, Russia has 6,400 nuclear weapons. China has just 250. The United States has 37. Right. So they almost have double the amount of nuclear weapons that the United States has. Russia does. And so this is really how I get into a lesson. So this is what I've actually through, right? So when I actually come out and do the full lesson, I'll get into this information and actually what's being talked about. That's often how I started, I'm heading down in a moment. I have to pick up a book that I want to read in regards to this. And then we can get into some of this more pertinent information here. And see where all these things line up. All right. Bring out some of these books. How these things look. So that being said, I'm going to sign off now, family. I'll be back on later tonight. I do have a presentation that I do want to do. Mongo Slade, yep. And the U.S. military says, watch this. He says, and the U.S. military has to upgrade its fighter jets. They use a lot of old equipment to upgrade. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. So as I'm finishing up this lesson, just want to show you how I kind of like started in the backdrop, because ultimately it all ties back to our people. Right? And so, a lot of what we see, these are not new players. The names have changed, but the game is the same. So I'm definitely going to be bringing it out in this lesson. Just touch on something. But again,